All right. Greetings to one and all. The topic that we're going to present on today is managing change in the organization. Uh, uh, so, guys, I mean, we're in the 21st century, right? A 21st century where every company is validated based upon one of these two things. Number one, it gets acquired by a huge MNC. So they say, wow, it's a successful company. Or it gets invested by a private equity fund or a hedge fund where people say that, yes, this company's invested, has taken in investments, and I think they're on the path to success. But what many people don't realize is that after this given process, there is a drastic shift in terms of decision makers in that given organization. And what this usually leads to is the company that is in the company is that it will pivot in terms of their functionality, in terms of their strategy, in terms of their vision and mission. And the employees of that given organization have to get adjusted to that given situation, no matter what. Whether it is in terms of functionality, if they function in a different way, if they have a completely different strategy under the new board of directors, or if they have a completely new mission as well. So I want to talk about the forces that bring about a change, right? To explain that concept, I want to take a case study of Henan Machinery and Electric Import and Export Corporation. To give a context, this company was set up in 1997, immediately a few years after China had opened its gates to export, right, to the whole world and became a leader. So they felt that this is the right time to get in by introducing a lot of export and import corporations. But in 2006, this company underwent a series of issues from 2006 to 2008. In 2006, number one, the general manager left due to health problems. And then what immediately happened is that they selected a business manager from the given team and they promoted him to the new general manager level, a rather young guy. At the same time, the founding team was getting really old, so they had to retire. And those vacant seats were filled by young people who were rather inexperienced, right? So this happened in 2006. And also at the same time in 2006, because the company was set based upon the 1979 policies where change in government policies to trade globally. Suddenly in 2006, the government decided that the export business is actually not getting in a lot of revenue for the country, right? So what they did is they increased the export tariff, which led to increase in prices of all the export goods. This led to a downfall in the Chinese export industry as a whole and changed this caused a change in the business model of Henan Machinery Company, where they changed one of their businesses of export into import. Issue number three that they faced was in 2008, where the financial crisis, the Great Depression of 2008 took place, which led to increase in prices of raw material, lost a lot of business as most of the clients were based out of America. So these were the issues that the company faced over a span of 2 years. The solutions will be discussed when he's discussing Kotter's plan. But let us understand the forces. Can we go to the next slide? Let us understand the forces of for change for this given case study. Number one is nature of the workforce. As we've seen, there was an aging workforce, and there were inexperienced young personnel who were in the capacity of vice presidents, who were in the capacity of really in positions of high power, right? Number two is world politics. We've seen that adoption of policies of reform and opening the Chinese industry to the outside world took place in 1979. There was a rise in prices of raw material due to the 2008 crisis. Coming to number three, the economic shocks. The 2008 financial crisis took place. Rise and fall of export companies in China took place because of the government's sudden increase in tariff. Number four, competition. Sudden increase in export tariff led to huge losses to companies that deal in export business. So when we say competition over here, it is a competition that was imbibed by the government's laws and policies. It's not a competition via some other company. So this is another type of competition that a lot of companies face due to the laws and regulations of that given country. Number five, social trend. The Chinese government realized that according to the United Nations, becoming a complete global place for trading is the way to go to increase the economy. So in 1979, they followed the social trend and they opened the gates for export. Number six, technology. Lastly, they introduced the world to advanced Chinese technologies and excellent processing techniques. This allowed China to become the hub for all the machinery, hub for all the technology. So these are the forces of changes that took place in Henan Machinery Company, and I wanted to explain it with the context without just giving you a theory. Going to the next part is planned change that a company goes through. What is a planned change? It is basically a change that the company has decided much before and want to go in a systematic manner to bring about the change, right? So the change activities are the things that are done by the board of directors or the CEO to bring about a change in terms of the business model, and the change agents are again the CEO. The Netflix is a case study that I want to discuss about in terms of planned change. As we all know, Reed Hastings Jr., the founder of Netflix, started this company as a DVD company to give door-to-door DVDs to break the chain of people going to a shop. But during the dot-com era, he realized that the world is shifting towards video platforms. And due to the rise of YouTube, Reed Hastings Jr. realized that that is the next place where Netflix has to be. So along with his DVD market, Reed Hastings also ensured that subsequently there was another business division which was working on a video streaming platform in terms of television shows, in terms of movies. And in 2007, Netflix introduced their video streaming platform. And as you all know, today it's the leading video platform in the world. So that's about it.
Okay. So one of the biggest barriers of organizational change is resistance to change. So which is also an integral part for each change process. So resistance to change doesn't necessarily surface in standardized ways. It can be overt, implicit, immediate, or deferred. So immediate resistance is the easiest to deal with, as the members of the organization show it immediately when the change is suggested. Whereas there is a greater challenge with managing resistance, which is deferred in nature. Like it can be like loss of motivation for to work for the organization, loss of loyalty towards the organization, making more mistakes, or increased of employees taking sick leaves, and hence more difficult to recognize these type of challenges. Now moving on to the sources of resistance to change. So there can be individual sources, so which basically reside in basic human characteristics such as perceptions, personalities, and needs. So these can be habits, like habits of working. When a person is working in an organization for a time, they have certain working habits, and with change they'll have to change those habits, and which can just cause resistance for the change. Then there is security. People with a high need for security are more likely to resist change because it threatens their feeling of safety. Moving on to economic factors, which when the pay is closely tied to productivity, people people are scared that what if due to the change they are not able to perform to their old standards with the new change. Now, then moving on to this organizational sources. So much of a organization's work is performed by groups, and several group characteristics can produce resistance to changes, like group inertia. Often, due to change, it alters the tasks and roles of the people in the group, which in turn disrupts the group norms and informal expectations that the group members have from one another. And this might lead to the members of the group resisting the change. Then there are threat to expertise of specialized groups. Now, moving on to the next slide. Let's see how to overcome resistance. So resistance to change, and this can be done by using 8 tactics. So I'll be explaining the first 2 points with the help of an example. So companies like Amazon and Google conduct seminars in which with their employees and stakeholders whenever they have any change planned, where they elaborate why this change is needed and keep it open for discussion and feedback with the employees after they have elaborated their plan. Now, in this way, the change won't seem unexpected and will feel brought about to by the employees, and thereby reduce resistance. Also, by getting everyone's participation in the change will make it less likely for them to resist the change because they have helped in creating the plan for the change. Now moving on to the next point, which is building support and communication commitment. So organizational transformation is usually accompanied by change in routine of people, taking people out of their long established comfort zones. So this may also lead to exhaustion, if especially if the organization is subject to a frequent changes. The next point being development of positive relationships. So people are more willing to accept change if they trust the managers implementing them and have good relationships with the managers. Moving on to the next point, which is that being implementing changes fairly. So one way the organization can minimize the negative impact of change is to implement the changes fairly. So for example, if they are planning to change the working hours of a company, the employees will be less resistant to it if they see that the change is done fairly in all departments. Then there is co-optation. So co-optation is to give the person who's resisting the change the central role in the change process. This can gain support of would-be resistors relatively easily. The next strategy being selecting people who are accepting to change. So besides selecting individuals who are willing to accept the change, it is also possible to select teams or group of people who are more adaptable. And the last tactic being coercion. In this tactic, the management uses direct threats or forces to the resistors. So these can be like threats of transfer, loss of promotions, negative performance evaluations, then poor letter of recommendation, and these all can be some of the examples of threats. Now moving on to the next slide. Okay. Yeah. Politics of change. So the politics of change is a very minor topic which emphasizes more on the difference in time a person has spent in the organization. So for example, a new employee who has just joined a few years ago will be more open to an idea of a new change when compared to a senior when compared to a senior employee who is already set his base in the organization, who is more likely to show resistance to the new changes. And this might lead to some kind of rift between the upper management and the lower management. And this is also the reason why most of the board directors, while choosing someone new in the leadership role, they choose the person outside from outside the organization. For example, Leena Nair, who was the chief HR officer of Hindustan Unilever, was recently made the CEO of the brand Chanel.
Let us take a look at how can an organization tackle such issues, bringing us to the essence of the presentation, that is how to manage such change. So there are primarily 4 ways by which this can be done. I'll be covering 2 of these theories with some exemplification of the same, followed by the remaining 2 approaches, which will be continued on by my colleagues. Okay, so Kurt Lewin was a German-American psychologist, and he was a profound influence on social, organizational, and applied psychology in the United States of America. He developed this 3-step change model. So to understand this, let me give a rather simple example, a little kiddish but significant. Let us say you have some ice in your fridge. So to make ice, you have to first put water in the holder, which you then slide into the rack in the freezer. And over some time, the water freezes, right? It becomes rigid. This is the same as what happens in an organization. While forming the organization, the way of functioning, the process or protocols followed, they solidify. So let's take an example. One day your grandparents come home. It signifies a change in management. Let's say hypothetically, your grandparents like red colored ice. So if the ice is frozen, it becomes difficult to make it red, right? You can't dissolve a red dye in solid ice. You can't hammer it in the ice. So what do you have to do? What's the first step? If anyone in the audience can answer.
I would probably melt the ice.
Correct, exactly. So you unfreeze it. Exactly. But even unfreezing, it can happen in 3 ways. Firstly, you can increase the driving forces. That is, you actively remove the ice from the freezer, subject it to heat. You put ice in a glass bowl and microwave it. Second, you remove the restraining forces. You stop the freezer's temperature control, which is keeping it frozen. And third, a combination of both. You just keep the freezer door open. This step is important for an organization since it helps make the environment conducive to change. Okay, next, you have melted the ice to water. What do you do now? You have to turn it red.
You add the dye.
Okay, all right, you add the dye. So this step is movement, changing the ice to a desired state that is red. So you add the dye. This signifies the actual change being brought about in the organization. Now that you have added it, the next step will be putting it back in the freezer rack to solidify it to red ice. This signifies making the organizational change concrete and cementing it by setting down protocols and officiating it. That is essentially what Levin's three-step change model is. Okay, so Kotter essentially provided a guide in a stepwise format for implementing Levin's model, which are his 8 steps. Kotter's 8 steps can be perfectly used to explain the solution to their third issue, which was the rise in price of raw materials during the financial crisis of 2008. So moving to the first step, which is establishing a sense of urgency. In this step, Henan observed the market to determine what are the realities of the market and potential crises and opportunities. Since the price increased for raw materials, production costs increased as well, and export trade suffered due to high prices, which needed to be resolved immediately to avoid going bankrupt. The second step, forming a powerful guiding coalition. In this case, to discuss strategies to respond to this crisis, the company gathered all managers and the vice secretary to form a powerful coalition. The third step, creating a vision for making changes. Excuse me a minute, I have a pop-up. Sorry. Okay. The third step, creating a vision for making changes. The guiding coalition figured out the 3 main crises the company was faced with and drew up corresponding strategies afterwards, such as storing up raw materials before the price increased any further, settling up bills with their clients at the right time, adjusting the reward system for their salespeople. And the fourth step, communicating the vision to the members of the organization, which is very important. The guiding coalition gathered the entire staff to inform them of the present conditions of the company so that all of the company can be prepared for confronting this crisis. Okay, the fifth step, empowering others to act on the vision. The coalition enabled a change in their way of manufacturing so as to address a raw material shortage. And most importantly was the attention given to the, now that the export department wasn't performing optimally, the expectations lied on the import department for bringing in revenue. The sixth step, planning for and creating short-term wins by publicizing success. This builds momentum for more change. So in this case, shortly after taking the actions which I have talked about, the staff was gathered again to sum up the achievement during this period of time. The reward system was also changed a little to be in favor of salesmen rather than the other office staff for encouraging them to keep their clients during this financial crisis. Step 7, consolidating improvements and producing. The profit of the company was improved after taking drastic steps, which also included a little harsher enforcement by collecting payments from clients. The clients felt a little unsatisfied by this icy way of doing business. So the leaders decided to change it to a friendlier way of interacting with them. But at the same time, they still assess the affordability of payment of the client. Okay, and the last step, which is institutionalizing new approaches. After trying out the new rewarding system for the salesmen, which I talked about, the company performance improved a lot, which led them to adopt this reward system in the long run. They set it down in their policies. And we can also say that only when any kind of change which is introduced becomes a real part of the company, it gets officiated and sets down into the policies, only then can the change be judged as successful.
So what action research is? We saw 2 models before, Levin's model and Kotter model. So action research is a type of model for bringing a change in an organization. So changes can be planned or unplanned. Action research model helps you in implementing the planned changes. It comes in whenever a company is trying to implement change the technology, change the process, policies, rules, or maybe to change organization goals. The model is based on data collection. It involves series of activities to be undertaken to find the solution. There are 5 steps of action research, which are diagnosis, analysis, feedback, action, and evaluation. Action research usually begins when organization has one or more problems that might be solved by change agent. First step is diagnosis. Diagnosis is about gathering information from the members of the organization. The information is gathered by asking questions, reviewing records, and listening to the concerns of employees. So the change agent try to identify which all area are into problems, and then it try to gather data. Diagnosis is followed by analysis. In analysis, the information gathered in the first step is analyzed into primary concerns, problem areas, and possible actions. Feedback. In this step, the change agent shares with the employee what has been found during diagnosis and analysis and discuss solutions for them. So what happens? Once the change agent has collected and analyzed all the data, he calls a meeting and try to explain this that this was the problem, this all data we have in our hand, and what are the corrective actions we are thinking for the change. At this point, members discuss the feedback with change agent, whether they want to work on identify problems or not. So once it is decided to move in with the change management process, next step comes into picture, which is action. In action, the solution decided in the previous steps are set in motion. And the last step is evaluation. Evaluation is evaluation of results after action is taken. So once diagnosis, analysis, feedback, and action have been taken, change and start measuring the effect of action. Are we getting positive effect or negative effect on the people, on the environment? Everything is to be measured. Moving to the next slide. I will explain action research with an example. Suppose that the problem is unproductive staff meetings. They are poorly attended. Members express low involvement in them. They are generally agreed to be unproductive. And you desire to make the meetings more productive. Following the action research model, the first step is diagnosis, to gather data about the status. Assume the data have been gathered and the data suggests the meetings are generally disliked and regarded as unproductive. The next step, according to action research, is analysis. So we will analyze the causes of the problem and we will generate one or more hypotheses. So you come up with the following three hypotheses. First, staff meetings will be more productive if manager uses topic from staff rather than by organization. Second, meetings if managers rotate the chair of meeting among the staff rather than manager always being chairperson, meeting will be more productive. And third, if meetings are held once a week instead of twice a week, they will be more productive. After these actions are set in motion, evaluation is done to see the effectiveness of actions. Now moving towards benefit of action research. So action research provides at least two specific benefits for an organization. First, it is problem focused, as a type of problem determines the type of change action. Second, because action research so heavily involves employees in the process, resistance to change is reduced. Now moving towards organizational development. What is organizational development? Organizational development is a collection of change methods that try to improve organizational effectiveness and employees' well-being. So why organizational development is needed? It is needed when there is increased number of interpersonal conflicts, increased number of employees leaving the organization, devotion to work is decreasing, and many more such factors. An example of this is Amazon. Amazon has announced that the company will invest 700 million till year 2025 in organization development for adapting new technologies, working conditions, and business procedures. Moving to the next slide. There are some values which need to be followed in most organization development efforts. First is respect people. People are the heart and brain of the organization. They are responsible for creating opportunities for growth. Hence, they must be treated with respect and dignity. Second, trust and support. Trust among people is very important for the growth of organization. Trust can only be built when people support each other. Thus, the people are to be believed and supported to have an effective organization. Third is power equalization. Hierarchical authority and control are minimized in effective organizations. Fourth is confrontation. In an organization, conflict should be dealt with openness without suppressing it. Fifth is participation. Increased participation have always been central goal and fundamental value of organization development.
Now we will discuss the interventions. Here we have 5 methods. The first one being survey feedback. Now, survey feedback is a very basic technique that involves collection of data by conducting a survey. So everyone in the team will be given a questionnaire where they have to give their perception on various topics, including working hours, salaries, their satisfaction with the job role, satisfaction with colleagues, supervisors, etc. And the data which is collected from this survey will be used to identify the problems within the organization. Now, once the problems are identified, a discussion can be encouraged among the employees where they can state their concerns and give problem-solving approaches. The next method will be process consultation. Now, this technique is based on the idea that many a times the manager will know that their unit's performance can be improved, but they are not able to pinpoint the problems or develop a solution to them. So here, the organization will hire an external consultant and the manager of the unit will be his client. So the consultant will have one-on-one discussions or even group discussions with the employees, and he will listen to their concerns. Now, this technique focuses more on solving interpersonal problems of the employees. But here, the consultant will not solve the organization's problems, but he will give the manager an insight as to what is going on in the organization. He can also initiate social interaction between the employees so that they can speak up about their concerns. And once their concerns are heard, then he will sit with the manager to discuss the possible solutions to them. And he will guide him as to solving the problems, and he will help him pay attention to things that require more improvement. So this way, now the manager will develop the skill to deal with these issues. Even when the consultant is gone, he can do all of this himself. Now the next process is team building. Team building is a way of assigning work to a group of people where everybody works collectively to achieve a common goal. So the members of the team will complement each other's tasks, like they have their own separate roles to play in order to achieve a common goal. So in recent times, more organizations have adopted the team structures where instead of having a vertical hierarchy where everybody reports to their superior, people will work collectively as a team where everybody works at the same level. So for a team to work effectively, the most important thing is there should be trust among the members of the team, and each member of the team should have a well-defined role. So everyone in the team is equally responsible to achieve that collective goal. Now the fourth one is intergroup development. Intergroup development is very similar to diversity training. In fact, it follows the concept of diversity training, but over here, the groups are different departments or various divisions within the organization. And it helps to put an end to various stereotypes about the work roles. Here we focus on improving intergroup relations so that the group will come forward and they will discuss their role in the company, and then they will tell the problems which are being faced by them. So this will pave a way for interpersonal communication, and it will develop relations between the employees from various departments. Now, once the problem is identified by them, the groups can now work together to find solutions to those problems. Now, the last method is appreciative inquiry. This method is very different from all the other OD approaches, as all of them are problem-centered, meaning we first identify the problem and then we find a solution to that problem. But in appreciative inquiry, the problem-solving approach is not used. See, appreciative literally means being grateful for something, right? So in this method, we will focus on the positives of the organization. Here, instead of fixing a problem, we will look at the strengths of the organization, which the members can build upon to improve their performance. So here we are using the social construction approach. Yes. So now the AI process has 4 steps, and we can also call it as the 4D model. It involves discovery, dream, design, and deploy. In discovery, the team will sit and they will discuss their achievements and strength, and we can also call this step as appreciation. So now here, the group will talk about their past experiences, and they will talk about when they thought the organization was doing its best work, and this would lead to development of a positive feeling among the employees. The next step is dreaming, which we can also call as innovating. Now, here the team will discuss their goals for the future as individuals and also as an organization as a whole. And this will develop a sense of commitment among the employees. In design, also called as co-constructing, the team will devise an action plan so as to achieve the dreams that they have stated. And the last D stands for deploy, where the employees will start working in order to achieve their goals. And they will follow the action plan that they have devised, and they will implement the strategies decided. So AI focuses on conversation and building of interpersonal relationships in order to improve understanding among individuals. And it is a very positive and effective method. And it is also utilized by various well-known organizations like American Express and the US Navy.
Creating a culture for change. Now, change needs to happen through a movement and not a top down mandate. Someone with authority can demand compliance, but they cannot dictate optimism, trust, conviction, or creativity. Now, G.V. Prasad, who was the former CEO and current co chairman and managing director of Dr. Reddy's, which is a global pharmaceutical company, understood this concept really well. Organizations can embrace change by transforming their cultures using two proactive approaches. One, which is stimulating a culture of innovation, and the second is creating a learning organization. So I'll be explaining these two approaches with the example of Dr. Reddy's. Now, starting with stimulating a culture of innovation. Innovation is an idea that has been transformed into practical reality. It can be a product, process, or service. Now, the sources of innovation include structural. For example, in organic organizations, the interactions between employees are very flexible because employees are placed at equal levels. Hence, they adopt innovations very easily. The second is cultural. In an innovative organization, success, failures, mistakes, hurdles, these are all very well recognized and rewarded. So managers won't criticize you for your mistakes and won't put you down for your failures because you may or may not be bound to fail if you try something new or something unresearched. And lastly, there is human resources. So innovative organizations offer a higher job security so that people don't fear making these mistakes. They want their workforce to become champions of change. Now, idea champions are people who are self-confident, they energize others, they have a vision of an innovation's potential, they gain other people's trust, and they're very good at decision making, which helps them introduce and implement innovations. So at Dr. Reddy's, due to the expansion of the company, the branches of the organization had become very misaligned. And to evolve the culture to become nimble, innovative, and patient-centered, Dr. Reddy's leadership team began with a search for purpose. They learned about everyone's needs, and then they distilled and defined the purpose of the company with 4 simple words, which is good health can't wait. Now the product packaging was redesigned. The projects were selected to highlight agility, innovation, and customer centricity. Dr. Reddy's also established 2 innovation labs to create a space where it's easier for people to embrace new beliefs and new behaviors. Now, once these projects were far along, Dr. Reddy's leadership used them to help communicate their purpose and ambitions for change. Now let's move on to knowing what is creating a learning organization. Now, a learning organization is one which makes continuous growth a part of its culture. So it facilitates the learning of its members and continuously transforms itself. The individuals are in a continuous search for new and better ways to adapt to a change and improve their performance. Now, people put aside their old ways of thinking, they learn to cooperate with each other, they understand how the organization really works, they agree on a set plan and vision and work towards achieving this. Now, over the course of several months at Dr. Reddy's, people from across the organization were engaged in the process of change. The approach is built on the fact that people are more apt to support something they have a stake in creating. Now, traditional organizations have 3 fundamental problems. One is the presence of fragmentation due to specializations. There is the creation of functional silos. The second is competition, which leads to a lack of knowledge sharing and collaboration. And the third is reactiveness, which misdirects the management's attention. It pushes out innovation completely and lays more emphasis on problem solving. So all of these problems are overcome by learning organizations. And now there are 2 types of learning. There is single loop and double loop. Now in single loop learning, when an error is detected, it is corrected by looking at the past routines and present policies. Whereas in double loop learning, it's typically used by learning organizations, for example, Dr. Reddy's. And here, errors are corrected by modifying objectives, the policies, and the standard routines, which can lead to overall improvement. Now, to transform an organization into a learning one, what should a manager do? They should first establish a strategy for innovation or change, which was done by Dr. Reddy's. They should reevaluate the organization structure, create flat reporting structures, decrease unnecessary boundaries, and create cross-functional teams. Another important thing a manager should do is reshape the organization's culture. Now, Dr. Reddy's linked its change in culture with a purpose and created a new corporate brand identity. Internally and externally, this act reinforced a message of unity and commitment. Now, during the organization-wide launch event, GV Prasad invited all the employees to define how they personally would help deliver access to affordable and innovative medicines to help patients lead a better life. And he saw change in the company culture right away. When the idea was introduced, there was a scientist who developed a product in 15 days and broke every rule there was in the company. Now, we all know just getting the raw materials would have taken him months, not to mention the entire process of making the medication. But this man was acting on urgency. Now, creating a sense of urgency is helpful, but it can be very short lived. So, to harness people's full, lasting commitment to change, they should feel a deep desire and even responsibility to change. So today, the entire company stands together after many changes along the way in pursuit of their purpose, good health can't wait. And this brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you.